laid waste, and he kneels down at the feet of his disciples, mimicking the position and the actions of a servant. And Peter is just dumbfounded. What are you doing? What are you doing? It's even obvious. Peter says, Jesus, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus is a nice guy, and he's a good teacher. So he steps back a minute and he says, Peter, you don't know what I'm doing right now. You're going to understand it in a little bit. Just go along with what I'm doing. Let me wash your feet. This is going to look really good when John is done with his book. Peter sees the appearances as everything. He doesn't get the depth of the moment. And he uses some of the strongest words that John could put in his mouth. Jesus, you will never wash my feet. Jesus, you will never wash my feet. And Jesus comes back right on top of him and says, you don't let me wash your feet, you have no part in what I'm doing. Sets the criterion for the relationship right up front. Peter gets it. He's not the brightest crayon in the box, and he's not the most savvy CEO that the church is going to have. But his heart is full and rich and open, and he's teachable. And Peter says, wash my hands, wash my feet, wash my head, wash me, wash what you need. Just like you and I. Don't always get it, but if our hearts are open. There's another point where Jesus and Peter are interacting, and Peter actually fails Jesus personally and miserably. And all of you who are familiar with the Gospels know this story. It's the second climax of Jesus' life and ministry. He's being exposed to the powers of the day, and he's looking in the face of his own crucifixion. And at this point, Peter denies him 3 times. He does something more than just be ignorant and out of it. He does something more than just say, I'm not really sure what's going on with this Jesus guy. He does something more than that. He actively says, I got nothing to do with him. No, I wasn't with those guys. He actively denies Jesus, utterly failing him, and not only the mission and the message that he was about, but him personally. Because, of course, Jesus is both the message and the mission and the messenger. When we fail Jesus, we fail a project. And Peter shows his humility. At this point, after these failures, Jesus is back to the very beginning, John is back to the very beginning of his interactions with Peter. Peter has shown himself to be a human being. Peter has shown himself perhaps to be just the man that he met back in chapter 1. He has not been transformed by 3 years of life and ministry. And what he does is he calls him by the name that he was given him when he first met him. Simon, son of John. And of course, Jesus, in this interaction with Peter, asks him 3 times, one for each moment of his denial. Do you love me? Of course, Peter says. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. For the second time he denies him, Jesus asks him again, Peter, do you love me? Peter says, of course, God. Lord. Jesus said, feed my sheep. Third time, Peter gets annoyed. A little arrogant for him to get annoyed, considering everything he put Jesus through, amen? But Jesus' open arms of grace and love and acceptance, what has happened on the cross has made everything right again. Peter has nothing to atone for. He only has this request. Do you love me, Peter? Feed my sheep. Jesus asks of Peter nothing more than to pick up the very love and ministry that Jesus has conducted throughout his life and his walk in Galilee. He doesn't tell us necessarily what to believe. He doesn't necessarily tell us which beliefs are the most important. And he doesn't say to him, just Peter, do you have a liberal or conservative agenda for this job that I have presented you here today? Peter, are you sure you got this right? I don't want you to do what the Pharisees are out to do. No, he doesn't ask any of those questions. What he says is, Peter, do you love me? Peter says, yes. And Jesus makes it clear. This is what you need to do. Feed my sheep. Now I have to draw this to a close because we have to end on time. Amen? Amen. That was the loudest amen I got all morning. Amen. Yeah. Wind this up. I'm not stupid, not yet. What does this have to do with our homecoming service? So what does it have to do with everything that we're dealing with today? Well, I'll just share with you this. And I wanted to have the chance to talk to you about all the things we do in campus ministries. I wanted to tell you about the chaplaincy program where students are exposed to the demands and the requirements of bivocational ministry, where they're out in the hall, and yet they also have to represent the faith that they hold and they share on campus. I wanted to talk to you about the CCLP program and the students that we bring together and who teach us as much as we teach them about what it means to be a part of congregational leadership and learn theology, biblical studies, and community of Christ's faith. I wanted to talk to you about the internships that take place here, where students are able to go to Detroit or Latin America and to see the church's mission in action. I wanted to talk to you about Graceland as this weird place where a liberal arts education and your faith journey can come together. Because students have the freedom and the responsibility to choose how they will craft their lives. I wanted to talk to you about that, and I wanted to suggest to you that the foundation of everything we do in campus ministries is the same one that we share when you are back home in your congregations or living out your professional lives, or if you look this capital campaign that we've launched this weekend, Graceland has launched this weekend, in the face, and you consider, what is my response to this challenge Graceland has put in front of us? I want to ask you the same question I have to ask myself. Where is your heart? And I'm not using this as a guilt trip to make you do anything in particular. I just want to do everything I can to shove you into this conversation between Peter and Jesus. The resurrected Jesus, not the guy who was wearing sandals and walking down the dusty streets. This is the resurrected Jesus. I want to push you into a conversation with him. And I want you to see this conversation take place in your own lives. As Jesus looks at you and asks you, do you love me? You say, of course. I love Graceland. I love everything it stands for. I love being here. I love the people that I've interacted with. I love the memories I have. Jesus says, what's up? Feed my sheep. As you go back to your places of worship, and you go back to your congregations and into your professional lives, I'm asking you to join the same sort of mission that I'm involved in here on campus and that I'm trying to feel my way through. Because more important than any sort of agenda that I can put up, liberal, conservative, political, Democrat, is this community of Christ enough? Is this not community of Christ? Is it too community of Christ? As I answer all these questions, I can tell you the foundation that I stand on is this. Jesus asked me, do you love me? My call is simple. Feed his sheep. And I ask you to join me in this project. Join me here at Graceland in any way you can with your time, talent, and resources, and do it out in wherever you came from. Force yourself into this conversation with Peter and Jesus and ask yourself, do I love my Jesus? Do I love the faith that ties Graceland and the community of Christ together? And if you do, I simply ask you this. Figure out to do whatever you can to feed his sheep. Graceland is a place where we do our best to feed sheep. To teach others to feed as they are being fed. Amen.
Amen.